I was very surprised at how much people love it.
Welcome to Dirt and Sea, where we talk all about the places and spaces of North Carolina and the people who make them awesome. I'm your host, Jed Byrne. Throughout my career in real estate development, finance, commercial brokerage, engineering, and construction, I have covered just about all facets of the real estate and land use ecosystem. This show is an opportunity to not only share what I've learned with you, but to also introduce you to my friends who are doing truly transformative work and sharing their stories. With each episode of Dirt and Sea, my goal is simple. I want you to walk away learning something new about land use. I promise to keep it simple and straight to the point. If you ever have any questions for me, feel free to reach out on Twitter at OakCityCRE. Now let's jump in. Today I had the privilege of sitting down with Jedidiah Gant. Jedidiah Gant is a designer living with his wife, 2 kids, and pup in downtown Raleigh, where he's walked the streets looking for creative opportunities in vinyl records since 2005. His work focuses on media strategy, creative urbanism, and community engagement, or some combination of all three. He is the brand director at Myriad, a video agency who focuses on making video make a difference for tech and social impact brands. As well, he is the director of the Raleigh Murals Project, a non-profit organization that has helped make Raleigh colorful since 2015 by installing murals with brands such as ACLU, Google Fiber, March for Our Lives, Red Hat, Truth, and Vans, among many others. He has a bachelor degree in architecture from UNC Charlotte and a master's degree in new media from NC State's College of Design. He has taught media theory in the Art and Design graduate program since 2019. Today, Jedidiah and I talk all about all sorts of things. We get to talk about 90s bands, we talk about the name Jedidiah that we both share, although it has 2 different spellings, and of course, we dig into the process of creating murals and public art in Raleigh. I think one of the main themes that came up is kind of how this exposure to art really leads to empowerment and the sharing of stories and ideas and the impact that that can have on a community like Raleigh, which, in my opinion, is a fantastic impact. So I'm grateful for Jedidiah and the Raleigh Murals Project and all the work that they do. And as always, we start off talking about Jedidiah's 2 truths and a lie.
Let's kind of see if you can guess what bands I saw in the 90s.
Okay, go for it.
And so these are it's more concerts than it is bands. So the first is Wu-Tang and Rage Against the Machine together.
Okay.
The second is the Four Tops, the Temptations, the Buckinghams, and the Turtles. And the third is 311 and De La Soul.
Man, okay. So the combinations now.
These are all real concerts.
Okay, so that was my next. Like, you're not going to throw in. Okay, I saw 3, but not the 4.
These are all 3 concerts. That definitely.
Where were these all in Raleigh? Where was Wu-Tang? Wilmington. Where was Four Tops?
Raleigh.
And De La Soul.
Raleigh also.
Okay. I'm just trying to guess because those are really. Well, the first and the third.
They're crazy pairings, all of them. They're all crazy pairings, in my opinion. Except the Four Tops of Temptations. That kind of makes sense.
That makes more sense to me. And as a non, I guess music, or there's a word for it.
And the one that the one that I didn't go to, I was supposed to go to.
So they're all really. See, this is hard. Okay, this is good. I'm gonna say you missed out on Wu-Tang and Rage Against the Machine.
I did, unfortunately.
And that was in Wilmington?
I don't think it happened, actually.
Okay.
It was,
so you had tickets, you just didn't get to go.
Yeah, I think I had tickets or I couldn't go for some reason, but I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that Wu-Tang pulled off the tour.
And it was a tour, so it wasn't like a special show or a
Rage tour. They were touring, and Wu-Tang pulled out. I think it was after Wu-Tang Forever came out, and they started having inner working issues.
Yeah.
And this is in their documentary, Mike's and Men. They talk about how that tour was like this huge deal, and they couldn't get along, and so they just pulled out of the tour.
So was this a thing in the 90s where they had like odd couples get together and do tours?
It must have been.
Does that still happen? I'm not going to many concerts these days.
Well, I mean, and it's like came back around. So then, like recently, I think Rizzo said he wanted to tour again with Rage, right? And then, so I've never seen Wu-Tang live. Mm-hmm. I've seen the Jizza, I've seen Ghostface and Raekwon together. I've seen Raekwon by himself. I've seen almost all the Wu-Tang, but I've never seen them, including here at Red Hat. And then I've never seen Rage, but I had tickets to Rage again with Run the Jewels at PNC. Was it 2020? Mm-hmm. And that got canceled, obviously, and it's pushed out to next year. So I'm almost, I'm going to almost see Rage, but I still have yet to see Wu-Tang because I was out of town for that Wu-Tang show this past year. And at some point it's just like, should I even see these bands? Those two bands, they're like, they're pretty past their prime right now. Right?
The answer is yes. My answer is yes. You should definitely go.
Yeah.
Don't want to go to the
Four
grave
Tops
missing
and
out on that.
Temptation show was a pretty amazing show. It was my first concert.
Really?
Actually. It was at Hardy's Walnut Creek is what it was called at the time. And I was 11 years old. And it kind of solidified my love for doo-wop music, which is pretty cool. And then the 311 De La Soul show was just kind of phenomenal. It was also at Hardy's Walnut Creek, which is like the only place to go to shows, obviously, in the 90s. Crazy pairing. I love both bands. Bought myself a Native Tongue shirt. This was right before I think De La and Tribe went on tour together. So, yeah. So that's kind of...
You win the music first concert. Most people do for me because mine was Reba McEntire,
Nice.
which was great. My mom and my older sister wanted to go, and I guess they felt bad leaving me out, so they bought me a ticket. And, that's my unfortunate... Nothing against Reba, but as like a cool first band story.
Yeah.
That doesn't get it. That doesn't get it done.
I mean, those tickets were bought for me. Friends' parents were going, and me and him went along, right? But then, like, it kind of...
opened up a door.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it kind of like walking around Hardy's Walnut Creek, listening to those bands or I guess they're called bands, musical groups.
Yeah,
ensembles. Ensembles, right? And it was really cool, and it did solidify like my. I always joke with my friends, like I always ask. This could be another one of your questions, like what would your retirement job be?
Yeah,
You're done. You're retired.
don't need to work, but you want to do something.
But you got to do something. I've always said mine might be either clerk at a radio or a clerk at a record store or a doo-wop DJ.
Yeah.
I'm like, WKNC or something. Just play doo-wop music.
Well, see, I mean, you could just start your own station. You don't even have to go. You can just do your own thing. Well, with that, I appreciate it. I'm shocked that I got that one right, but that was a guess, frankly. But with that, tell us who you are. And kind of how do you introduce yourself to a room full of strangers if you ever find yourself in a room full of strangers?
It's been a while since I found myself in a room full of strangers. That was back in
full room of anything,
the
right?
meetup days of the early 2000s.
The befores.
Yeah, exactly. The befores when you go to like network. Remember that? So I consider myself a designer, I guess. I have an undergraduate degree in architecture and a master's in new media. Both of those are from design schools. So I kind of, think about creativity and design from that perspective, But also, like, I think of myself as this, like, someone who's lived in a really small town of 20,000 people, Lumberton, North Carolina, but also, a city of 9 million, like London. Mm-hmm. And so I've kind of seen both ends of the spectrum, like politically, socially, racially, et cetera. And so I like to kind of situate myself in between those. Creativity and design is kind of how I like to think about myself.
Who you are.
Yeah, and I do creative projects from that, like creativity and the idea that I have architecture and new media as a background. I think a lot about my projects like combining the real and the digital world. Yeah. And so like architecture was very real, new media is very digital. And so a lot of my projects kind of overlap in both of those places.
Which, I mean, I think that's kind of where, so I'll tell you where I first intersected with your work, but also I think where this podcast, and, it's about places and spaces, but to me, it's, for what you do, my sense of a lot of what you do on the public art and mural side, can start in a digital idea and you're sketching, on an iPad and all of a sudden, or with projection or something, you're doing something and all of a sudden it's on the side of a building or a wall. My story was the Shaw Tunnel, which I think was one of the first Raleigh Mural Project's murals. It was the first. So it wasn't necessarily the mural story, but we ran the Rock and Roll Raleigh half marathon, and I was new to town, and we were running, and Frank, I guess that was the first time I'd ever run down that street, and they had the Shaw University brass band up on the bridge playing. So as we come across this hill, and the sound was mind blowing. I will never forget that sound of just, because they had bands all, but it was just, I mean, this fan and the acoustics, and you're running through the tunnel. And I mean, I've never been on a college sports team, but it's kind of what it felt like. You're running out of this.
The mural was there, you're saying.
And the mural was there. I mean, so
yeah,
you run right through it. You run right under the bridge. And it was, I mean, that was my
yeah.
favorite. That stands to this day as probably one of my favorite Raleigh memories of all time.
Cool. Yeah.
So anyway, I wanted to make sure I told you that before, because I'm not sure I told you that
sure.
story. But so tell me, you know, on the mural front and connecting design and places and, you know, Raleigh, frankly, I mean, I think most of your work on that front has been here, but where did that start from? What was your first experience with either public art or a mural?
So some of my earliest memories of murals is kind of, I wouldn't call them generic or pedestrian, but they were kind of like driving through small towns in North Carolina and you seeing kind of the side of a building that has like a Pepsi mural or you know, these classic sponsored murals in like small town Rockingham or somewhere. That were advertisements, right? Or you go through another small town in North Carolina and there would be like these, I don't know what you call them, like the Sgt. Pepper type murals where there's like everybody in the town has been painted on a wall kind of thing, right? And I think that's kind of that's what I remember like seeing, but those didn't really influence me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that like I saw those and thought I should help make murals in cities. You know, I think most of the kind of influence came, you know, during architecture school and traveling across the United States and kind of opening my brain up to other arts, we'll say.
Yeah.
But then moving to London, like kind of fully opened my mind up to like public art, because when I lived there, it was, I guess, 2003 to 2005. And I hung out in an area called Hoxton, Clerkenwell. It's like East London, which was kind of the trendy area at the time. And I was in my early 20s, so it kind of made sense I was there at the bars and the clubs and the scene. But that's also where Banksy was doing a lot of his early stuff. You know, the rats were everywhere, you know, here and there. Color murals were just kind of part of the fabric. It was just kind of what you do in neighborhoods like that, is you put murals up, because it kind of makes the neighborhoods, which are usually brick, concrete, kind of, and London's not dry, it's a dark, damp city, you know, so murals kind of add a pop of color. Yeah. And I think that and just kind of seeing that kind of like the energy around public art in a place like London. And so it was the murals on the wall, but it was also the paintings on the Tate Modern inside, you know, and that all the art museums there are free. And so just the idea of art in general was very prevalent in that society.
Do they have a system, or is there a difference in structure? I mean, is there, you know, can you go apply for a mural permit and it's like super easy in London? Or is there some structural difference, or is it just a cultural?
I think it's cultural.
Yeah.
I mean, I just said that all the museums are free. You know what I mean? So like you can go to, and we have art museums that are free here. Yeah. But that is a new thing, right? You know, you used to have to pay to get in the CAM until a few years ago. In Nashville, you have to pay to get, you know, these are private collections and in CMA, you have to pay to get into part of it, but you have to, you know, or it's free now, but you have to pay to get into certain exhibitions, et cetera. You know, so there's layers now that's tiered, but there's so many museums there that are just free that I think it's just part of, you know, growing up, that the Europeans, you know, will loop London and the Brits and the Europeans, that art is just something you grow up around.
I would have almost guessed that it would have been a reverse, that a great public art mural culture would have arisen out of a place where private art or art was more exclusive, right? Like, so if I couldn't participate in the museums because the cost was a barrier, you know, maybe there's like this backlash culture or subculture or alternate culture where it's like, okay, fine, if you're going to have your museums, we'll have the streets. So that surprises me.
I think it's exposure. I mean, you're exposed to, it's just like if you hang out with people that are different than you start to think like them, you know, it's just
so by
like
seeing more art, now you say, okay, well, here, I can do this.
Be. Yeah. I mean, it's gotta be. I mean, look at,
I can't do the gilded frame, you know, 12-foot tall pieces, but I can paint on a wall.
I mean,
a rat on a wall.
And these kind of like, oh, I could do that, you know, or Basquiat, or even like Keith Haring and some of, I mean, that's getting into America, of course, but like some of that of like, just like, you can do this. I think it is that like empowerment, exposure, the things you're around, you want to do more of it. And I think to me, that's why murals are becoming more successful in this city.
Yeah.
It's because there's more of them.
Yeah. No, I mean,
it's influence, it's exposure, right?
Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, I think you kind of changed my mind on that. It makes a lot of sense to say, well, if you're around this and if you're exposed to this, then kind of like begets like, and you start to build on that.
Yeah, anyone could be an artist, right?
So tell me, if you could walk me through kind of a recent project. One that comes to mind is the Green City USA mural that just completed a few weeks ago here in town. But if you could walk me through kind of what is how does something like that come to be?
Well, with Green City USA, we need to know how long you have on this podcast because it could take a while. But that project actually started, what year was it? 2018. I think it was around this time. We're recording in October. I think it was around September, October. The Raleigh Murals Project, my partner and I, JT Moore at the time, got an opportunity to sit down with AT&T to talk about the project. But if I go back to that project, I mean, that's a wall that we've wanted for years because it's basically since we started the project, and we're kind of looking for cool walls because the building that we're referring to is the AT&T building in downtown Raleigh. It's a service center essentially. Mm-hmm. It's got servers in the building. And,
have you been inside?
Yeah.
I've been terribly curious to go inside and see what's in there.
I haven't actually seen the servers, but I've been to a meeting room in there. So a lot of cities have these. New York has a massive one. It's kind of this crazy Blade Runner looking, building. And a lot of cities have these windowless concrete buildings, and many times it's AT&T or some other, communication company that has it. So anyway, it was on our radar. We got a chance to sit down in 2018. And at the time we had proposed doing the entire ground floor.
Yeah.
Because we thought that'd be easy. Like, this is going to be a hard project to do. Let's because
it's a big. I mean, it's a tall building.
It's a massive building. Yeah, I mean, it's 8-10 stories maybe. Yeah. But then not only that, it's like a whole, half of a city block essentially. So it's a long building too. Yeah. So we thought, let's impact as much as we can on the ground floor and let's just do it. So we kind of mapped out that ground floor 10 feet, 12 feet up. And we wanted to do the entire kind of lower level, the pedestrian level, so that people could walk down and have, maybe their different moments throughout the wall, etc. And they liked the idea, but then kind of a lot of time passed. Like, they kind of just sat on it, right? And part of that was like we were trying to figure out funding, because that's one of the big.
Because at that point you have permission. Right, and you have permission from the building owner.
We have an understanding that it's a good idea. Yeah. I wouldn't say permission.
Is there a third party permission that's needed for something like that? I mean, so they own the building, and if you own the building, and I'm assuming it's not like there are signage rules in the city, but since this isn't a sign, there's no, the city can't necessarily say you can't do a mural.
No. So I mean, that's a piece of information that's good for anybody to know, which is like if you're trying to do a mural, it's like. It's public art. I mean, you can do public art anywhere you want in the city, as long as it doesn't veer into a signage category. Yeah. If it and that is essentially if someone can walk by it and say that's an ad,
right.
Which means a large percentage of the painting. We won't even say large percentage in the art. Large percentage of the painting has a brand presence to it, right? And so that's when it veers on the side of signage is when it has more of a brand presence.
So my thought was it was always text. Like if it says AT&T on the side of the building, that's a problem. But is it if it's brand colors? Are you veering? Okay, so it's a little wider
iconography or any of that. You could get into a
challenge.
And we've had a few that are like right on the edge. With the hurricanes and a few others. Like, how do you paint the hurricane? I hate hurricanes mural without it being advertising for the hurricanes, right? I mean. Can't paint a hurricane. Yeah. Can you paint players? Yeah, if they're done in an artistic style, right? And so that one was a little bit of a kind of challenge. So,
So you've got the permission. They're sitting on the idea.
Yeah, they're sitting on.
We're working on funding.
They're sitting on like not even a concept. They're sitting on hey, this is one way to put a mural in this building. Yeah. And we were working with Downtown Raleigh Alliance, the DRA at the time too, because they're the ones that brought us into the conversation because they had a good relationship with AT&T. Because they work with a lot of downtown business owners. And so a year and a half goes by and we're kind of, it's like, Hansel and Gretel. We're still putting down the little like breadcrumbs of like, what's going on with this? AT&T is still interested. Again, this is 7 years after we wanted this wall and finally got it. And we're like, oh, we had it so close. So it kind of went away for a while. And in many cases, situations like that, especially with someone like AT&T, it's like you have to go up the chain. Mm-hmm. It's not just local. It's like you got to talk.
There's no vice president of murals and public art.
No. So, but the local AT&T representative was a huge fan. Mm-hmm. He wanted to do it. He just had to figure it out. And then we had to figure out funding and some sponsors, et cetera. And so 2 years later, we brought in Scott Nurkin, who runs the mural shop, who we've worked with on the Shaw mural that you mentioned before, and several others. And we kind of sat down with them and what they wanted at the time, and they're like, give us some ideas, but we want to go up.
Yeah.
And we're like, great, like, yes, let's go up. They're like, but you can only do this. And they set the parameters of where we could be within the painting at the time. And that was the size was going to be dictated by the cost, the budget as well. So we came to them, and this is a typical mural process is, we choose an artist based on a variety of factors, and we propose several, we'll call them concepts. Mm-hmm. So those were like animals, like wildlife, we're starting to think about the local area, and there's lots of, people are always reporting like foxes in the city and these bears. And, so we had this kind of like, origami kind of animal kind of mindset. Mm-hmm. And, there was some figurative kind of, including some historic Raleigh figures that would be really tall on the building. Clarence Leitner, the first black mayors of Raleigh, was one of the ideas, and some abstract ideas, some like welcome to Raleigh type signage, mm-hmm. Like the one in Portland that has the big kind of deer jumping across it. Mm-hmm. So we had a handful of different concepts, and I can't remember which one they chose. I think they actually chose one that was like, well, we had these concepts, and they kind of chose one or two of the concepts, and then we gave them designs for each one of those. One of which was the abstract. Another was the early Green City ideas, was kind of in the back pocket. And then another, so the abstract, that, and then there was like the origami animals, I think was one. We then showed those to them, and they actually chose one that we thought we were moving forward with, which was like this idea of like paint spilling out of the building, which was a really kind of weird and cool kind of concept. Yeah. It looked like it was coming out of one of those holes, kind of spilling all the way down. And then things froze again. Yeah. Right. And this is like September 2020. We're mid-COVID, the first year of COVID. And, it's like, oh, okay, we thought we were doing something. And
this is 2 years after you started.
This is 2 years after we started. And so we thought we had this idea nailed down. And, then they came back and said, hey, some of this green tech kind of idea that you had is pretty cool. Let's go back that direction, mm-hmm. and kind of balance this idea of Raleigh being a combination of green tech, like technology from like RTP, mm-hmm. and organic greenery. Sure. Okay. So we then proposed probably 12 different ideas. Wow. On that, what we were calling at the time Green City USA. Then we chose one or two of them, narrowed it down. We changed the shape of the tree. We did this. We added, new layers to it. They also wanted an interactive element, mm-hmm. on it. Mm-hmm. So then we had to propose kind of, okay, we hadn't designed this for interactivity on the ground floor.
Stand at the bottom, right?
Yeah, and so we added this kind of like you can blow the tree, together through the leaves, etc. And so we nailed down a design. That was like maybe March or April of this year, I think. Then Scott had to get everything in order, mm-hmm. the lift and timing to paint, because he had projects, mm-hmm. Because all muralists have tons of projects in their queue ready. So he had to, find some time. And then, of course, that pushed it into the middle of the summer, mm-hmm. which is one of the hardest times to paint.
Hot.
It's hot. He's on a lift, or he was actually on scaffolding, because then we had to figure out for this situation, it's a corner of a very busy street. So we were going to close down one lane and have a lift, mm-hmm. like lifting him up, a kind of hydraulic kind of thing. But then decided that it would be best to have the scaffolding that's hanging from the roof. He had never done that. I don't think. Maybe he had one other project, but because it is such a tall building.
And he's painted some really tall art before, if I recall.
Yeah, it's the biggest he's done, though, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and so then this project has so many layers, like, and then he got the scaffolding or drop scaffolding. I don't know the exact phrase, but he had that, and it wasn't as wide as we had hoped. So we had to, speaking of digital and physical, he's on the scaffolding calling me. I'm at my home on Photoshop, like redesigning aspects of this.
It fits.
So it fits within the scaffolding because he can only reach so far off the scaffolding. And so, unfortunately, it got a little narrower than we had hoped.
Yeah. Interesting.
It still works and it's still cool, and no one will know that unless I just told you.
The cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's like an Easter egg too. Like we put Easter eggs in our art sometimes, like places like the Shimmer Wall, but that's another story. And so finally he's on the wall. We're redesigning it. I'm driving over here every few days, and he's like, "What do you think?" I was like, "Yeah, okay, well, let's adjust this." And so I'd go home and kind of redesign it. I'd like text him an image, and then he'd print it out, and he'd paint a little bit more, and then so it was then this like back and forth kind of design process. I was very surprised at how much people love it.
Yeah,
it's just cool. I mean, just people saying, "Oh,
it's a good surprise."
Oh, it's really great, and it's just like anything you design or do, or you're so close to it that you see all the imperfections, or you see you know
about those changes, and right.
And I could talk to you. We just talked about how it took 3 or more years to do, and all of that is kind of layered within the kind of complexities and like the weight of the project, right?
But from my perspective personally, it's like all of a sudden you see this scaffolding, or the equipment on the wall, and then all of a sudden you see a little bit of paint, and then a few days you see more and more, and then you go, oh, it's a tree, and then you see, and so it was, I don't know the start to finish timing, but it seemed like this whole thing just kind of poof out of nowhere happened, and I know obviously that there was a lot of work, but from an outsider's perspective, it's just kind of this magic.
That's good to hear, and for us it is that, and it's it's more than like, and it's so funny because like the Shimmer Wall is the same thing. Like in the beginning, the Shimmer Wall, when we designed it, like my first designs for the Shimmer Wall were not trees.
Yeah,
like they were the ones we landed on. We landed on a tree. Same exact situation here is we landed on it because it just made sense, right? And so like, and that's with the whole Green City USA thing. It was like, it was pretty cool that like we were thinking a lot about, like, if you stand in Nash Square where you're looking at that mural and you turn around, you don't see any oak trees. You see like a magnolia tree and a maple, and like, and so in my opinion, the city of Raleigh is more than the city of oaks. It's like, it's Green City USA. We have Dix Park, we have Chavis Park, we have Fletcher, we have Olmsted, we have Nash, we have Moore, we have, I could probably just keep going, the Greenway system, et cetera, that it's all about this green landscape.
Yeah.
So to us, that's what like doing this mural was. Sure, it's a tree, but our hope is like that we do a whole forest of trees on that building over the years.
That'd be
there's
cool.
7 or more, and it just adds to the layer that this is, and they're not, any of them are not oaks, they're just green trees, because I think it is, to me, Green City USA is a moniker that we can own.
Yeah.
That feels more metropolitan. It feels more national. It feels more of it also goes to the green tech, et cetera. So, I mean, that's a little bit of a tangent, but it's just like, that was part of the process too, is really like, how do you name a piece of art? How do you name a mural that it can mean more than just like the name of the art itself? It could actually have a ramification throughout the city.
Yeah, much larger impact.
Yeah, and I want to make Green City USA shirts, know, that have nothing to do with the mural. They just have a kind of that concept, because I think that we can own that as a city. And that, so
you've heard it here first. If you have any ideas for Green City USA shirts or other clothing, throw them out there. Get them out on Twitter.
We'll do it.
So that's one way. Mm-hmm. What is the long way? What is the ideal process? And in that, kind of where from two parties. Well, what is the ideal process? We'll start there, and then we'll circle back to kind of who can learn a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so that process had Raleigh Murals Project involved. We were involved in all the meetings. We were involved in the process. We were involved in the design. Mm-hmm. We were involved in the execution. One of the ideal process, I mean, there's a lot of different processes.
Sounds right.
Processes. processing aspects of the of our work is there's different angles it can come through, whether a muralist is trying to put up a mural, whether the building owner has a wall and wants a mural on it, or whether an organization comes in and says we want a mural in this city. So an example of that, I think that the ideal one is someone comes in, like ACLU North Carolina came in a few years ago. They have funding already in their pocket. They have a concept, which is all about the right to protest. They need an artist and they need a wall, right? We found them a wall pretty quickly. It just happened to be, someone who was sympathetic to the ACLU cause. And then they said to us, we would like a black woman to paint this, a black woman muralist. We said, okay, got exactly the right person. It's perfect for this, and we helped a little bit with that design process and kind of shepherded it a little bit and brought it along. But the two of them, the ACLU and Dare Coulter, who was the artist, worked together. They executed it. Yeah. We helped here and there, but we kind of pulled out of the process because that's pretty ideal for us, because we want them. We don't want to like micromanage anything, or we want them, the artists, to do their thing, and we want we want there to be funding, in the till already, and able to kind of make the project continue to go forward. So those are kind of, if I'm understanding correctly, those are kind of the four food groups in no particular order, but funding, concept, artist, and location. And so if you're an artist, you're kind of solving for the other three. If you're a landlord, you're solving for the other three, right? So you may have a location. You may have some funding. You may have a location. You may have some funding, right? So maybe two. Artist, so if you're one of those parties, I mean, what is the best way in your mind to reduce some of those hurdles? And really, frankly, I mean, I think the artist thing makes sense to me, at least. Concepts are about ideas and creation. Locations are physical places. I mean, that's a limited set of criteria. But what about funding for a second? So what's a ballpark budget? If you have those three other things, how much funding do you think you need for Depends on the size of the wall. A few years ago, I was giving a mural tour on Friday, and it's always the question. People are always like, "How much does that cost?" Or what's this? And I don't like to tell people specific budgets, because it's like telling someone someone's salary. But what about order of magnitude? I was just going to say general ballpark. I was going to say that a few years ago, I would have said, we could do 1,000 to 5,000. Yeah. That's kind of a rough, few years ago. But that's on the ground. Maybe ladders. And those are small murals. What size though? I mean, that's 4 foot by 4 foot, or 10 foot by 10 foot, or 10 by 10, a little bigger maybe. Yeah. But 10 by 20 maybe, but not. That's again, it's complexity. But again, that was a few years ago when murals weren't in demand in this city, and the walls, like, we were doing smaller things. Whereas now, I would say you need to at least start with 5 or more, because the projects are getting bigger or more complex, and the ones that we work on, at least, there are small ones here and there, and we do work on ones that are $500. That are kind of quick. Someone's got some extra time and they're willing to make $500, but that's very rare, and it's very kind of, we'll say, petite. It's a small, quick thing. They don't need ladders, they don't need lifts, they don't. It's very simple design, etc. But so most of the projects we've worked on over the past few years have been more starting at 5, going up to 20s and 30s, depending on the size and the complexity of the which is good to see that we're getting there, because it means we're doing more impactful, bigger, more complex art. And value, I would think. I mean, again, I don't have an art background, but I've got a business background. And to me, that just speaks to the value increasing, which is a good thing. And so someone appreciates, if 10 years ago you said, oh, this is going to be $50,000, you may have gotten laughed out of the room, and now it's okay. Well, I get it. This is going to be a statement piece that everybody sees, that people are going to take pictures of and share and send. Say, hey, we went to Raleigh and we saw this thing, and it blew me away. Yeah, and I think a lot more developers and building owners, especially developers, are coming to us, or places like the Village, or Raleigh Ironworks, or whoever it is, coming and saying, or a new, like, the Line, or some of these apartment buildings that are wanting these. And so I know they have money, and I can't remember what it was, like 0.5% it used to be, like in new development projects you had to do for public art. You had to put that aside, and I think it maybe went up to 1%.
That's what I thought I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, and so to me, that's still tiny.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you think of the side of a parking deck, like this exposed parking deck, like paint the thing with a cool mural and spend $100,000. You'll get it back.
Well, and to me, the
the
interesting part of that conversation, again, from my developer background, is developers, if anything, understand value proposition, and to me, that is the conversation that needs to be had. And you talk about a parking deck. Well, they're going to spend, in certain places, you're going to have required screening. And so you say, okay, we're going to spend $100,000 screening this parking deck or this section. If you get in early enough in the process and have that discussion early, and they understand, okay, is there something more creative that we can do? Is there something different that we can do? I mean, again, I think, and the value proposition is there, and you could tie that to, hey, if all else being equal, this building is going to lease up 6 months quicker because people reckon it's got brand recognition because of the art.
It's just cooler. Yeah. I mean, a good story in that case is like when I was on the appearance commission, gosh, I don't know, 7 years ago or so, like we were getting in at our conversations were happening earlier in the design, early in the development process, and they needed to approve certain aspects of it. And, when Sky House was being built in downtown, like, which is now kind of a ubiquitous piece of downtown, right? That 0.5% of art was kind of part of the conversation. And, and they were like, it felt as though, and this is not a dig on the Sky House people or whatever, because I don't know them, but like, it felt as though they were just going through the process of like, we've got to put 0.5% of art. We'll do this. Yeah. And I think they hired Matt McConnell, and he did these cool blue things, these blue waves. Waves. They're an entrance. It's very cool. Glad they did it. But like, that was cool, and it felt like they just had to do it, and so they were doing it. But like, I chimed in and I said, hey, you guys are from, I don't know where they're from, Charlotte or Atlanta or somewhere, right? Do you know the history of this corner? And they're like, no. It's like, okay, well, up until a few months ago, there were 3 Wallace Simpson whirligigs on this corner. I think that y'all should buy those. Go find them and buy them and bring them back to the site, because that's what was here, and that's historic, and that you could spend your money on that type of art too. You don't have to just like programmatically prescribe something. And again, this has nothing to do with McConnell's art either, because it's very beautiful and I'm glad they did it, but they also got one of those and brought it back. And now it's, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but outside the boba place or whatever, there's that one Wallace Simpson, but there used to be 3 on that site, and so I don't think that they thought about it in that way of like, what's the historical context? How am I fitting in this city that I'm just plopping a skyscraper in and going to rake in the money, right? Like, it means more to us as pedestrians and residents of the city
to see that.
Yeah, to see. I mean, that's a Wallace Simpson whirligig that has always been on that site, you know? And
I mean, to me, cool. And again, I wasn't in the room, I wasn't part of that conversation, but my sense is most developers that I know don't have the art background, don't understand. And so you say, hey, what kind of art? You're just human nature. You're going to pick, proximate and recent, or the first thing that comes about, because you've got this $100 million project or $1 million or 500. You've got this big project, and again, the art piece is a part of it, but it's not the whole. And so if you have to go out and educate yourself on murals. How am I going to get an artist? What artist am I going to pick? What's the concept?
And what's the value?
And so to me, that's part of the exciting thing about this conversation is like, if people maybe get a grasp of what their options are, who they can call, and again, because you can shortcut. I mean, like, developers don't know how to build buildings. They're not contractors. They're not architects. But they have teams of people that they call on, and experts, interior designers, all of these things that they call upon. And so if you or others like you get involved in that conversation, now you're just a part of the team. And you say, hey, we've got this money. We've got this opportunity. I want to get the most value out of it as I can. Yeah. How can I go about doing that? Oh, why wouldn't you tie your art to the location? Why wouldn't you use local artists? Why wouldn't you use this concept? And I think if we can kind of shortcut that conversation, then kind of the gates really open up. Because if you told somebody from scratch who's a developer, say, hey, let's talk about art, and they're not an expert, you're going to get an entirely different outcome than, hey, I'm a team member, or I know these, here's what I know, let me share that with you.
Yeah, and another piece of that is like some of the conversations I've had the murals I've seen. I've been in conversations, and those conversations we then were not a part of, and they went a different direction. Or we've talked to developments that are coming to town and they want to do, I don't know the exact term, but it's branded art. We'll just call it branded art, like quotes and like, you know, cute graphics and stuff. That's like, it feels like a pill and stick kind of like thing, and nothing against those type of artists, but there's or even that type of art, but it feels very like they had to do it, or they felt like they had to do it from a branding perspective. And so what are they getting out of it? I think only so much. You know, I think people are, and if you want like that value, that branding value, I would say go with something that's a little more authentic or local, or, you know, like big A art. You know, big A art is a mural done by an artist that's bespoke and it's done on this wall. So little A is like a cool quote.
We got a blank spot and we're going to put a vinyl stick on it there.
It's not even a vinyl stick. It's a mural that looks like a vinyl stick. Okay, it's just like, it's like stripes with a quote that says, hug everyone, or something like, you know what I mean? It's
it's a true statement. You should hug everyone. People, maybe not now.
Sure, you should.
Maybe not right now.
Of course, but I don't think. I think
it's a missed opportunity.
10 people are going to take a photo of hug everyone. 1,000 are going to take a photo of a cool mural.
So when would you? I mean, advice to developers. What would you suggest? Because again, I've never met a developer that doesn't understand value proposition, and I think you can make a compelling argument like you just did. But if that argument happens after we've designed everything and now we've got to get, you know, our CO in 2 months and we're scrambling, then that's, you've limited your resources. So how would you recommend developers interact with this type of public art, and when should that conversation? What should that conversation be?
As early as possible, just like you said. I mean, like there's developers that are coming to us while it's still framing. Like they're still they know the walls that they're going to have. I mean,
but that's later than, I mean, that's after land acquisition. That's after design. So maybe I mean, I guess Mike is it.
I'm okay with
getting the architects on board to have these conversations and know where to go to say, hey, when your client comes in and you guys are talking about, oh, this art thing, what are we going to do?
We've had several that have done that. That the architects themselves come to us and they're in the design process. And they're the ones that reach out and they say, hey, we've talked to a few here and there of saying, hey, we're designing this. We want to integrate murals. Let's look at the design. Let's talk about how big is this a big enough wall? Is it cool enough? Is it a good location? Is it, you know, what type of interaction versus like a leftover wall, you know, it's in the back corner somewhere or whatever.
Right. So, this is our one big flat spot.
But I think, I don't have any problem with either one of those. But I have the challenge I have with is like, we need to open the building in 6 weeks. We're putting the final touches on it right now. Right. Can you give some murals? Because there's like, I mean, we know about like goods shortages in the world right now. You know, there are artist shortages when it comes to,
or even timing. Like if it's winter, I mean, if it's 30 degrees, you can't paint. You know,
I mean, we've got a month and a half, and then murals will stop for 3 months. Because
that's interesting.
It's we've got some they're not gonna happen because of the process and a variety of different reasons. They're gonna have to be pushed till March of next year, and that's fine. But
it's tough.
It's
I would say again, I wouldn't have thought of that necessarily if I'm not a painter. I wouldn't be that. I wouldn't know if I didn't know to think about it.
Paint won't solidify, or whatever the right term is. You know, it won't dry in a proper way, and it won't last as long. You know.
So what about those 4 criteria? If you're an artist, then so developers get in early as possible, have those conversations early, get the ideas going. If you're an artist and you know you've got the concept, you've got, obviously you're the artist, you're the talent. Is it funding or location more important? If you're trying to get this work done, what is the bigger hurdle? And how would you address it?
I mean, funding is always the biggest hurdle. Because people don't want to give up their money, you know, or they don't don't understand the value of what something costs. So
that to me is people. I hear this conversation about money all the time, and again, from a developer's perspective, people say, well, you know, developer. It has nothing to do with that. It's an investment, and so you're and art. I won't try to say that art isn't, but that to me is the hurdle. Is if I come to you and say, "Will you give me $100?" You're going to say no because you're not getting something from it. But if I say, "Hey, if you give me $100, say I'll give you $110 tomorrow," and you trust me, then you would have no problem giving up $100. But so that to me is usually the hurdle. It's not the cost, it's the value.
But let's go back to what we were talking about in London, or you know, Paris, or you know, Italy. You go there, what do you take photos of? I mean, you take photos of maybe the beach or the beautiful scenes, but you're going to take pictures of the art, whether it's the sculptures or the museums or the culture, we'll call it.
I mean, to me, when I do that, if I travel and I go to a place, to me, it's kind of, I don't know if whimsy is the right word, but it's the whimsy and surprise, right? You turn a corner, you say, "Holy!" And it could be, it could be a 4-inch by 4-inch mural,
it's the Banksy rat,
exactly. Or it could be, something much larger. But to me, that's part of it. And with architecture, which is important and critical and has huge impacts on people in a city, in a place. If you go to a major city that's all skyscrapers, or you go to a small town that's all main storefronts, it kind of starts to blend and becomes one cohesive thing, which is not a bad thing.
Which is Raleigh in 2005.
Right.
I mean, there were hardly any murals here, and it was all just brick and concrete walls.
And so you get some interest, which I think is right.
Yeah,
a huge
now
value
people are
proposition.
talking about this city, and it's not just like what we're doing, but it's like what the artists are doing and what the City of Raleigh Arts is doing. Sarah Powers and Kelly McChesney over there are doing a phenomenal job. It's people recognizing they're coming into a place that has a lot of murals, so we need to be a part of that culture. And so we've kind of set the bar higher by doing more of these as a society, and like the surprise, and you turn a corner and you're like, oh, cool, that's great, right? The neon kind of scene here, and things like that has kind of shifted the surprise and the kind of cultural relevance of art in this city, which is fantastic.
So what do you think is the future of either murals or public art in Raleigh?
More bigger, I think, is, more better. More of them, they're better, they're bigger. I think, there's the idea that technology could be an integral aspect. We did a Google Fiber one that's an AR mural. Taylor worked on another one over at Red Hat that has some technological aspects. But I don't like fully get into the techie angle of murals. I mean, I and that's crazy because I talk a lot about how I'm combined digital and physical, and a lot of both of my thesis projects were all about how to take physical elements and turn them into digital components. But I don't think we fully figured out this technology because there's a accessibility hurdle. You need to have a particular phone with a particular app and this and that to make it something. But I'll just use like a bit of a case study, not case study, but I was in some reviews at the design school at NC State yesterday, and this student proposed this kind of his thesis was like, COVID has sucked. More people need to get outside because nature and being outside is good for the body. You know, and he had all the stats. It's like why people should be outside doing stuff, whether it's in walking through a city or in a park or in a forest. And he is creating this concept where he would have 3 murals. Those murals would then just have a QR code that you go and you scan the QR code, and that QR code kind of makes you do something, or it kind of turns you into a little bit of a scavenger hunt of what's next after you see that one. And it's not a mural tour. It was then you have these other tasks that you could do to be outside more, right? And it's not just mural to mural. And he based it on like geocaching and some of the other kind of like finding things and like you were saying about surprise. And to me, that sounds pretty cool because it's like it's allowing the mural to become more of a catalyst for, we'll say public art, or we'll say just being around the city or discovering other aspects of your city. And there was something about that. Again, this just happened yesterday, and it was kind of, it was like partly digital.
Partly technological. Well, it sounds like it's additive, right? So if I'm walking by and I see that, then I get the full experience, right?
Sure.
But then if I happen to notice the QR code or I see the sign, then I get like 150% of the experience.
And
it's not taken away because I can't.
And back to the accessibility, the AR and all these cool, they're awesome. But a QR code, anyone's phone now can use the photo app. I think definitely on iPhones, and I'm pretty sure Androids. You point your camera at it, and it now recognizes it. Yeah. And if there's a web browser on your phone, which most phones now do, then that accessibility thing drops versus like the Google Fiber one had to be on an Android phone. You had to download an app and you had to, and so I think probably 15 people have seen that AR,
that's
16. The other Jed raised his hand. And so, I think to me the future is not necessarily this technological thing. It's just being cool, like more of them.
Yeah.
And by cool, I mean actually like they have more meaning in our community, and they become more of like a community like personality and perspective. And we're trying to do more and more of those that like represent who we are as a city, and not just like just colorful stuff.
Well, my sense is back all the way to the London conversation at the beginning was, as more people see it, as they're exposed, as they hear the stories, as they say, oh, well, I like that there's, it's not just a picture. It has a picture with a story. I like that story. Here's another story. And they understand what the process is and how, someone should do that. It's like most great ideas. Someone should do something about that. Someone should do this. And then you get to say, what? I can do this, or I can connect, or I can, I can't paint, but I can be, a funding partner. Someone should tell this story. Someone should share this story. And I think that'd be pretty cool. So before we get into kind of the closing period, you mentioned it, right? So there's 2 Jeds in this room, which I think is awesome and is a very rare occurrence. But to completely non sequitur, tell me if you could. I can't let you leave without hearing the story of your name. I can give you the short 2 seconds of my name too. But
is your name Jed or Jedidiah?
Jedidiah.
It is Jedidiah.
It is Jedidiah, but it's spelled different.
Spelled the same?
No, Jedidiah.
You have the E. Okay, mine's Jedidiah for any of you who care about the different spellings of our name for some reason. I didn't know that. I didn't know that yours was the full 8 characters from the different. Mine came from television show Barnaby Jones.
Really?
Yeah. So his Barnaby Jones was kind of in the Andy Griffith those years TV shows in the 70s, mid-late 70s. There was a character named Jedidiah Jones. It was like his nephew, Barnaby Jones' nephew, and he was like a lawyer or something. He came to town to like solve the murder of his father, who was a retired police officer. And then he ended up staying and helping. So he became kind of a bigger piece of the show in some form. So my mom was a big fan of the show. His name was actually spelled with like yours, with the E. But then I don't know why my parents actually don't know the story of why it's different. Maybe she heard it on the show. And then looked it up.
Figured out the spelling,
and therefore it was a different spelling where she saw it or something. My spelling is actually in 2 Samuel 12:25. It's in the Bible, and it was like King Solomon's Hebrew name or something. But that's not where it came from.
Jedidiah Jones.
Jedidiah is Jedidiah Romana J.R. Jones was his name.
Wow. That's so it's funny you said that, because mine is a family name. I have a great uncle that's Jedidiah Dennison, which is my middle name for those who care about names. But and his is spelled Jedediah. But I always thought, so people ask me, oh, is it in the Bible? Or and it is, but it's spelled Jedidih. So there are very few Jededs that I've ever met. And so as I got older, I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I wonder if my parents spelled it wrong. Like they just
somebody did, because I think that's where it came from.
I would assume, but it wasn't my parents. I looked it up. There's a lineage book in my family but we did. I was able to verify that my parents spelled it the way it is in my family. But again, I think that's probably wrong.
At some point,
right? Somebody changed it.
It's like Smith went to Smythe, what I mean, or whatever it is.
Over time.
Over time, it kind of changed.
I've seen as far as I know in my life of 7 years, I've run across one other Jedediah, and it was a couple of years ago at church. There was a kid and he had a name tag, and I was like, holy cow, that's extremely rare.
It's rare.
It is.
It's cool. It's it's hard for people. More people actually misspell my last name, which is 4 letters, Gant, than they do my first name.
Interesting.
But Gant with 2 T's.
Yeah, I think
Giant.
People. My last name, I guess people misspell too, but people just seem to not know what to do with Jed. Like it's like Ted or something else. Jeb. I get called Jeb a lot
all the time. Yeah.
Anyway,
we digress.
We digress. So this is Murals and Jeds. So lastly, then, kind of just to wrap it all up, is there anything that you wish we talked about but didn't, or is there something is there something you would recommend folks do, see, read? My problem is like with recommending something to someone is I intake so much information. Yeah. It's like just part of how I'm built mentally. And so like, to me, like music is a really good way to think. Music, books, and film, right? Just the culture, like take in as much as you can. Like
I listen to a lot of like dub music, and recently, like I own I shouldn't say huge. I own a lot of vinyl records, too many. And recently, I bought like I found another reggae Christmas album. And so it's I don't know when this will come out, but if you're getting towards the Christmas time and you're a Christmas music fan, I'd recommend listening to reggae Christmas music because it's
what's the album then? What should we look up? What should we go get?
Oh, I that's a good question. I can't remember what it's called because they all have like, I think there's one called Irie Christmas that I have too.
I'll get a link or an email. I'll drop it in the show notes.
I can send you a few links, but so reggae Christmas music is something that I could probably listen to it all year because it's so just chill, and there's those hints of that. I did read a book recently that's really cool. It's called Glitter Up the Dark. Mm-hmm. It is the history of like LGBT gay influence on pop music.
Okay. Glitter Up the Dark.
Yeah, so it's a pretty cool book. Written by Sophia Geffen, I think. A trans author. That was really cool. And just for like artists, if you're an artist or a designer, like Austin Kleon's books are ones that I really love. I mean, the titles are enough, keep going, still like an artist and show your work. Those are all that I keep coming back around to, as well as Questlove's book about creativity is something that's kind of on my shelf right now. Read about stuff, watch stuff. I mean, that's something I do a lot. I'm in the book club at so-and-so about 33 1/3, the little book series about albums, and I really enjoy doing that.
I think that's a trait that you and I shared then, because I'm very high on the input scale. I love, and it's taken me, especially on the reading front. I didn't start really reading until I was 30, which was like an embarrassing. Like I could read, but I didn't enjoy reading. But it's amazing to me how much information is out there and what you can do if you can piece together that information. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like, right, there's Christmas music, there's reggae music, there's reggae Christmas music.
And I happened to find this other one the other day. I was like, whoa, there's another one.
Got the whole collection.
It's great.
But I mean, and something like this too, right, is to me, the magic happens in community and places when you bring together assets and resources, right? Yeah. An artist, I've got a building, somebody has funding, somebody has a concept, and boom, you've got a mural. And I think that same logic and same structure can apply to all sorts of things, right? Sure. I have this idea, and you have, some access, or I, that to me is
And
just
one
the
last
more you
thing,
can consume, the better, as long as it then results in action. That's the tricky part to me, is I can consume all day long, but I got to remember to do something with it.
And on that front, like if you're interested in, you, Jed, or anyone listening, interested in more about the kind of culture around murals and street art, etc., reading up on Keith Haring, reading up on Basquiat, reading up on Banksy, even like Jenny Holzer and, some of the other artists that do really cool art that is kind of this transformative work, but also watching like Style Wars and Wild Style, and of course Banksy's exit through the gift shop, are all really, Star Wars and Wild Style are from the 80s, 90s, late 80s, early 90s, so they have that kind of Brooklyn grittiness, but they talk about where, hip-hop and graffiti, murals, and breakdancing all overlapped, and so how this kind of culture got started. And I think that's really influential in the type of work that we want to do, which is kind of be relative to your local culture in whatever way possible, and make it, it's not just some pretty art on a wall, but it has a statement. It's making our city better, whether it's through the message or whether it is through the shapes on the wall. And I think that's something that it's all good to watch and kind of, like you said, input so that you can learn more about that culture itself. And then
connect the dots and apply it to your place and space. Cool. Well, Jedidiah Gant, thank you for your time, and look forward to catching up again soon and seeing some more murals.
Thank you, Jedidiah Byrne.
As always, I'm so grateful that you have chosen to share this time with me. If you ever have any questions about Dirt NC or any land use related issues, you can reach out to me on Twitter at OakCityCRE. Also, if you're looking for a simple and straight to the point weekly update on commercial development in Raleigh, you can subscribe to my newsletter at www.oakcitycre.com. Until next time, thank you.